views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. After getting elected as the Bronx's first female district attorney earlier this month, tonight's guest said it's a new day in the Bronx, promising to ease the horrific backlog of cases and to reform the horrors at Rikers Island, and also to take a fresh look at the scourge of guns and drugs and gangs in the Bronx. But Judge Darcelle Clark also will take over the DA's office after what some have called an anti-democratic election process and amid questions over a case that tragically resulted in a suicide. All of that is on the table for us tonight as she makes her first TV appearance since becoming the Bronx's new chief prosecutor. The phones are also open, so if you have a question or comment, call in at 718-960-7261 or send an email to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org, or you can post it on our Facebook page, and we'll read it on the air during a future edition of our program. For the here and now, the first female district attorney in the history of the Bronx, DA-elect Judge Darcelle Clark. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you.
You must feel great. This is something you've wanted to do for a long time.
It is. It is a lifelong dream.
Tell me why. Why did you want to be the Bronx's DA? Some people would say, well, okay, maybe this is a good career move for me, but you wanted to do this way back.
Yeah, well, you know, growing up my whole life in the Bronx, I grew up in public housing and Soundview projects, as we called it then, public housing now. Growing up in that neighborhood where crime, you know, was written all over the community, and I saw the effects of what crime did to the community, I knew that I wanted to do something to alleviate those problems in my community. My parents were high school graduates. I was the first in my family to go to college. And when I left Soundview, was the first time really that I left the Bronx and went on to Boston College to pursue a career that I hope would lead me to community service. And knowing that, you know, drugs was prevalent in the community, I went on to law school because that's what I wanted to do. And I could have gone anywhere after going to Howard Law School, but I wanted to come back to the Bronx to help my community. And I came back.
I saw the list of transition team members. It's a huge transition team. I was like, well, is she DA of the Bronx or is she, you know, senator or president? 37 members on the team. What are their tasks going to be? How long will they serve? What are you looking to do as we make the transition from Robert Johnson to Darcelle Clark?
Well, there's a number of things that they're going to do. And yes, I'm very proud of that blue ribbon team that I put together. And, you know, it's important to have good people to help you, and when you're embarking on such an important office as I'm about to take on. Their job is really going to help me identify new talent that I can bring into the office. They're going to help me evaluate the talent that we have in the office, to look at the overall structure of the office, to see what things are working well, where there can be some improvement, you know, bring in some new ideas. They are going to help me identify the issues and concerns in the community and how the DA's office can work better with the community. And just overall really get me in touch with what is going on to build a quality 21st century district attorney's office.
At what point will you say, okay, you know what, we've already made the transition, now we're on our own?
Well, I mean, they're going to help me for the next 6 weeks until January 1st when I step into office. Some may stay on further. I didn't want to impose on their time but so much. But it'll be as of January 1st. And really what they're going to do is give me a head start into getting into the office so that I can hit the ground running.
What's the best way to administrate cases? Have DAs assigned as far as case type, needed responsibilities, or processes, or do you assign a case to one district attorney and let that DA or assistant DA take it all the way through and all the different things? And I guess that gets into how you really view the office and going to organize the office.
Well, the way it is now, they have a partial vertical prosecution, and that is what you just described, one assistant handling a case from beginning to end. I think that's the most effective way to run the office, is by vertical prosecution. That way that one assistant will be on the case from its inception, meeting the witnesses, the police officers, knowing what investigation needs to be done to enhance the case, and then take it on through, discovery, hearings, ultimately trial, or whatever disposition. The way that it's organized now, one assistant writes up the case, another assistant arranges the case gets assigned to another assistant in another bureau. If they move on from that bureau, the case stays in the bureau, another assistant gets it, and it's like 3 or 4 assistants on one case. I don't think that's an effective way to do things, and it causes a lot of delays.
You have touted something called the Vista Plan
Yes.
through this campaign to this point. Why don't you explain to me and to the people of the Bronx what that is?
It's just something that I came up with, my approach on how I want to organize the office. And VISTA stands for the following: the vertical prosecution, which I just explained to you. It will be internal controls, which means that because there's such a backlog in the cases in the Bronx, I want more accountability from the leaders in the office, them to be accountable directly to me as to what is going on with a case. There shouldn't be a time where I pick up a phone and ask on what's going on with a case where I don't know what's happening. And I'm going to make the bureau chiefs and the deputy chiefs and the supervisors more accountable to me. So I'm going to do some internal controls, something like a ComStat, internal ComStat. I want to stand up to corruption. That's something that obviously is in the news in as much as
on
today.
this very day,
Yeah,
that's correct.
So, and something that's very important that any DA's office needs to be actively involved in, because corruption is a disservice to the people of the community. I want time-sensitive prosecutions, meaning that the DA's office needs to be ready to move to trial at any time. These undue delays not only are unfair to the victims, but also to defendants. So I'm going to make sure that when my office is ready for trial, they're actually going to be ready for trial. And then lastly, I want to do active investigations. I don't want to just wait for cases to hit the door at 161st Street. I'm going to have my office out into the community, identifying the issues that are affecting the community as far as crime is concerned, and start actively investigating with the help of the community to make sure that we can do the best job possible.
I talked at the top of the show about, and you've already addressed it somewhat, about the backlog of cases, and there was, we'll talk about in a moment, that terrible story of the young man who committed suicide waiting for trial. It's just a horrible thought and concept. How can you overall assure speedier trials? I mean, you talked about having attorneys ready to go, but is that the only thing?
Well, I mean, it's a collaboration to work with the defense bar, to work with the court, the Department of Corrections. It's not just the DA's job, It's the job of all the stakeholders in the criminal justice system. But I have to take a leadership role, because it is the DA's office that initiates the charging. The police make arrests, but it's not until the district attorney formally charges somebody that the process actually begins. So I have to make sure that I keep my finger on the pulse and make sure that my office is on top of everything that's happening. The way things lag behind now is that people wait until the case is on. It gets adjourned, and instead of working on it constantly, they'll just wait till the day before the case is on and try to hurry up and do the work. And that's not just in the DA's office, but that's all over. But that trend I want to stop in my office.
So then this horrible Kalief Browder case, who killed himself after waiting for a trial, you apparently had seen the case as a judge. Just what are your thoughts on looking back at it now? How did something like that happen, or did you already explain basically how that could happen?
Well, first of all, it's a terrible tragedy, and my heart goes out to that family still, because that should never happen. No one should have to wait in jail for 3 years for any kind of case. I don't care what kind it is, because speedy trial is that speedy trial. But what happens, you know, in that case, I did preside over it during some of the adjournments, but it was hindsight is 2020. Unfortunately, I was on the case early on in it. It was somewhere around a little over a year old when I first saw the case, and I was in a calendar part. And what that part is that that's the holding pattern for sending the case out to trial once it's ready. So, you know, there are a number of reasons why a case may or may not be ready. I don't totally recall all the circumstances of his case, but I know that, you know, from going forward, something like that is not going to happen again on my watch, because I'm going to make sure that we are constantly looking at those older cases to see where they are, what is holding them up, and what we can do to proceed.
Your predecessor was criticized pretty roundly for low conviction rates. How do you improve them? We would like to think that we're getting, the people of the Bronx are getting represented by the highest quality, legal processing, et cetera. How do you turn low conviction rates into better conviction rates?
Well, first of all, one of the things that needs to be done is that the cases have to move a lot faster. What happens is that when there's such a backlog, the cases get old, witnesses disappear, their memories fade, and, you know, delay is basically, is not the friend of the DA. It's more amenable to the defendant because of those things that I described. With once I take office and I implement the Vista program and these internal controls and really be sensitive to the time that is taken for the cases to go to trial, I think the conviction rate will easily go up, because we're going to stay on top of what's happening with all the cases. When I go in, I'm going to have to do an inventory of all the cases in the office, starting with the oldest ones first, of course, in order to, you know, sift through to see what is wrong, whether or not there could be some disposition, continue to investigate and see how to make it better. Also, people have to want to serve jury duty. People can't, you know, evade jury service. You can't complain about the system and that things are not working.
And then talk your way out of jury
exactly,
service.
you don't want to serve. So,
there's no question we have to ask about this. The process that got you to this point was controversial, to say the least. And when Borough President Diaz was here, I asked him the same question. I'll ask you the same question. Did anyone, the Borough President, the Speaker of the Assembly, the head of the Democratic Party, the current DA, did anybody say, you know what, if he steps down after the primary, then the people are, and the will of the people are basically taken out of it? Nobody said, you know what, this isn't a very democratic way of handling this?
No, you know what? I mean, the situation, look, before September 27th, I was an Associate Justice at the Appellate Division First Department. I mean, there's only 53 appellate judges in the entire state, and I was one of them. I made my way through the judiciary for 16 years. I sat there. A very good job. I've always wanted to be DA, and I never made that a secret. Anybody that knows me knows that, you know, one day I thought that, you know, this would be a possibility. When that would happen, you know, I didn't know. And you know,
hadn't thought about running, let's say, in the summer or you know, leading up to the primary?
No, because there was no vacancy. See, the thing is, Robert Johnson is 27-year incumbent. Just, you know, just like I didn't run against him, anybody else could have run against him and didn't. And this, you know, one of the reasons is that he was a 27-year incumbent. But this is the situation. There's a process to fill vacancies when they happen, and I didn't create the process. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. But I didn't create the process, and I didn't create the vacancy. But I think I'm happy and I'm honored that the Bronx Democratic Party looked to me to fill the vacancy, because I have nearly 30 years of experience in criminal justice.
Do you think the process should be changed?
I think there's room for improvement. I mean, you know, either way, there has to be a process to fill a vacancy. Whether it was this way, where after the primary, the Democratic Party got to fill a vacancy, or if he had decided to run and was reelected and then said, I don't want to run, then the governor can fill that vacancy until the next election happens. So either way that it happened, it wasn't going to be a choice of the people per se. The way it happened for me, the people did have a choice, because then the Republicans and the Conservative put forth a candidate, and then there was a race.
We have Mark from Pelham Parkway calling. Mark is with us. Hello, Mark. Nice to have you with us, sir.
Hey, Gary. How you doing? It's a
Doing
pleasure
well.
to be back on for a while. I have a few questions.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought up the Kalief Browder case. First things is I have a few questions for
Just
the
ask
elected
the
Madam
questions.
DA.
Go to it. Time is short.
Okay, I'll go right to it. Madam DA, you have 38 listed former ADAs and present sitting ADAs who were clear violation of Brady violations of the 1962 Brady violation. Failure to share information with defendant's counsel. Yes, if you look at the record, you will see you had one of your ADAs who was
Mark, ask the question.
Well, I am. That's what do you plan to do with ADAs who are in violation of 1962 Brady violation laws? How do you, when you were a presiding judge over early on in the Kalief Browder case, you don't find there's something wrong when an ADA says that they're ready for trial and then it's a 2-month adjournment because it has to be a week and that counts only as a week? And
I think
you
she
didn't
already
find
answered
anything
that
wrong
question.
early on with those type of situations. Okay. How can we feel comfortable that you will be better than ADA Johnson? Because ADA Johnson is a total failure to most people of the Bronx, and he's got one of the worst records. He's well
Got
known
it, Mark.
all over
Thank
the
you.
world. So I'd like to hear how you're going to really
the
change.
first question is, I'm unfamiliar with, he's addressing apparently attorneys who are in violation of something. I'm unfamiliar with it.
Right.
Thank you. We got it. Go ahead.
It's discovery. When there's a case, the DA has to turn over certain information to the defense, and the defense, on the reciprocal side, has to turn over information to the DA. Brady that he's talking about deals with exculpatory information. So if the DA is in possession of some materials that will, exculpate the defendant, they're supposed to turn that over immediately. And if they don't, that's a violation.
So he's alleging that has been a problem and a violation, or there have been violations of that in the Bronx. Okay,
well, under my administration and under any administration, no DA is living up to their oath by purposely refusing to turn over exculpatory information on any discovery. And any assistant of mine that does that will be held accountable. There's no place for that in my office. So I'm going to make sure. But with these internal controls, again, I'm going to stay on top of these cases to make sure that things like that don't happen.
And did you want to address his second question about the Kalief Browder tragedy that, basically you were a judge and they kept delaying, and that was among the things that went into this horrible tragedy?
Well, a lot of it, some of the things that the caller spoke of are things that are in the law, that are in the statute on how you calculate the readiness of a case. And there's pre-readiness and post-readiness. It's a lot of legal stuff, but suffice it to say this, that once the DA announces ready in a case, anytime there's an adjournment after that, they're making a request for an adjournment, they ask for how much time that they want, and they're charged with that. Unfortunately, with the way that the court system is, sometimes the judges can't put it on the exact date that the DA requests or the exact date that the defense requests. So therefore, the court has a responsibility of managing their calendar and caseload and put it on when they need to. Are the adjournments too long? Perhaps, and that's something that the DA's office, as well as the defense bar, and as well as the court, are going to work on. That's part of getting rid of some of the backlog, is making sure that the adjournments are a lot shorter.
I'm making an educated guess that your experience on the other side of the bench is going to come into play, because you will know what a judge is thinking, or what, certainly as far as the administrative aspect of it and what the rules are, and it'll probably help move some of these things on and certainly prevent the kind of thing we had.
Yeah, I think I'm in a unique position, because not only was I a judge in the Bronx and also on the appellate division, so I'm very familiar with the appellate issues, but those same judges that are in the Bronx now were my colleagues. So hopefully I'll have a honeymoon period at some point. But I mean, they
I'm
know.
I'm not going to bet on that.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
It's a tough
but
world out there.
But they know my reputation as a judge, and they will, understand what I'm trying to do as a district attorney.
Another thing which has to be asked, because it's today, as Shelley Silver was, if people didn't hear, was convicted on all the corruption charges, and the Bronx has had a rogues gallery of corruption in politics to its legacy. Is it a conflict, since you were selected by elected officials, for you, it turns out that one of them needs to be prosecuted or needs to be looked at for some impropriety. Is that a conflict?
No, it's not a conflict because I was elected by the people, not by the politicians that are part of my particular political party. It's nothing, contradictory to being a district attorney elected by the people and in a political party, and at the same time having to investigate corruption. I'm going to set up a public integrity unit to make sure that we know how to deal and investigate such cases as these.
They have that in Brooklyn, right?
They have it in Brooklyn, and they have it in a lot of places. And by the way, political corruption is not something unique only to the Bronx. It happens all over the state, as we know. But I'm going to have a public integrity unit and have assistant district attorneys and investigators trained to do that. And I'm going to follow the evidence wherever it leads me, and regardless of whoever it helps or hurts, favor or not.
I've only got about 80 more pages of questions. I'm going to ask you a quick one, I don't know how quick it is, and then we'll go to the telephone and take another call. Rikers Island, what do we do? It's a mess, and it's a mess for everybody involved. What do we do?
Right. Well, there's no sugarcoating about it. It's a dangerous, horrendous situation there at this time. And as district attorney, it's part of my jurisdiction that all offenses that happen at Rikers Island are prosecuted in the Bronx because Rikers Island is considered the Bronx, although some people don't understand why, but that's what it is. But it's a challenge. And it's something that I'm not going to shy away from. It's part of my job. Rikers Island basically is another neighborhood in the Bronx, and right now it's one of the worst neighborhoods that we have in the Bronx. What do we need to do? I, want to take a leadership role, of course, in that, but it's all the stakeholders that have to be involved. The mayor's office, the city council, the Department of Corrections, Department of Investigation, NYPD. All of us have to come to the table and really develop some real reforms on that. Bail reform is part of this. A lot of people are sitting in there waiting for trial because they're poor. We need to talk about that. But at the same time, I'm going to set up a satellite office out there. You want me to prosecute the cases? I will. I'll be right out there. All right, I'm going to put some investigators and DAs out there, and those inmates will know if they commit offense in Rikers Island, they're going to look at consecutive time. Yeah.
Let's go quickly to Bob from Riverdale. Bob, we're running out of time. What you got? Are you with us?
Yeah, Gary.
Go ahead. What do you got?
Hey, D.A. Clark, as a judge, I'm sure, and Gary touched on this before about the Silva case. In your observations of the trial, was it a good case? Did the U.S. attorney prove his points? And was the verdict a right verdict?
I'm going to just jump in. Thank you, Bob. That's a tough one to ask and put you in that position.
Yeah,
right
I can.
now.
I don't know what all the evidence was. I just watched it on the news.
Right. Let's get rid of that dial tone there, please. We got it? Somebody? There we go.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know all the evidence.
Let's move on. It's not for you. The last thing I want to ask is about the tendency now in the city council has moved toward decriminalizing low-level crimes. Is that a direction you believe the city ought to go, or do you lean towards a more traditional law and order approach?
I believe in a hybrid. I think it should be done on a case-by-case basis. I think that, the jails are full of low-level, nonviolent offenders where there are things that we can do besides put them in jail. So I'm very much in favor of alternatives to incarceration and different approaches to crimes. People need drug treatment. Mental health is a big issue that we need to deal with. Community service, homelessness, joblessness. Those are all the areas that we can work on that will decrease the reason why people get involved in some of these low-level crimes.
I think we're going to have to invite you back at some point once you get started, because I still have all these questions and people are calling up. But Darcelle Clark, the new district attorney in the Bronx, the first woman we've had in the position, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We certainly hope to bring you back at some point when we can talk about, this case worked out, this didn't work out, and we'll see how you do.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time and wish
Thank
you
you
the best of luck. Folks, viewer mail about last week's show that we had on Islamophobia. We got a Facebook message from Aldo RP, who said, let Muslim Americans practice their faith with a rational, intellectual understanding of Islam so they may reach and teach others rather than ask them to apologize for crimes committed against humanity by someone who has a political goal to inflict fear and tyranny. Thank you to Aldo. And then if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then we ask you to send them to us in an email at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or put them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. We ask you to like Bronx Talk on Facebook, and you can check out our archives at bronxnet.org. Bronx Talk is on the lower right navigation bar, and you just click it and you can see all the old shows. Next week, we'll follow this up with another high-profile guest, the Speaker of the New York State Assembly, Carl Hastie. Will come back to the program, first time as Speaker, and he will be our guest next week. Thanks to our producer is Dahlia Gonzalez, our director Shirley Arrieta, the cast of Thousands, to D.A. Clark. We'll wish her good luck again. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Invest in the future of kids, like a stock. Not the kind of stock that's about making money, but a stock for social change. A whole new kind of investment called Better Futures. When you invest, it helps kids go to college. Believe in us, invest in us, watch us grow.
My name is Sydney, and I'm your dividend.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. So I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Enroll, we say, we want you to be okay. Enroll, we say, take care of people for goodness sake. There's a plan for every budget, so don't accept defeat. Now you can get covered and still buy me treats.
You take care of your pets. Now it's their turn to take care of you. Visit getcoveredamerica.org to learn about your health insurance options.
You're doing great. We're going to try this again, okay?
Okay.
Wheels, pedals, handlebar, brakes. Sit up straight, keep your weight in the center, keep your eyes on the road, hands on the grips, button the seat. If we feel ourselves falling, what do?
Just keep
pedaling. Good girl. Now remember, it's all about balance and steering. Steer with your hands, steer with your body. Steer into the corners and you stay out of trouble. And the bell's your buddy, so go ahead and ding that. All right, you ready? Here we go. Pedal, honey, pedal. There you go, you're a bike rider.